Okay, before I start and introduce things, I'm going to tell you a story. So this is a story about Sophie. This is Sophie, and Sophie's been at her organisation for a while, and her managers like her, she's doing really well, and there's this opportunity that comes up. So there's an opportunity to, the organisation decided to build a product. It's going to be a fantastic product, it's going to save the organisation, it's the best thing ever, it's so important. And they say, well, Sophie, you've been around for a while, and you really understand the organisation, and you're really good. So what we're going to do is we're going to put you in charge of this product. She thinks, fantastic, this is a great opportunity. It's a new and exciting thing. It's a pay rise, all those kind of good things. Great. So she's got the organisation on one side, and she's got the team on the other side. She's feeling like, okay, it's going to be great. And the organisation starts saying things to her like, okay, now you're in charge of this very important product. Off you go. And don't mess it up. So she's thinking, all right, now this is quite a bit of pressure. But it's all right, I've got this team that I'm going to be working with. They're an agile team, they know how to do this stuff, they'll support me. And the team say to her, right, what are we going to do next? She's the product manager, she's the person that knows what they're doing, she's in charge of the vision. And she's thinking, so, does this feel familiar to anyone? All right, so Sophie isn't a real person, although I've seen this happen in lots of situations where someone is thrown in. And sometimes organizations think, sink or swim is a great management technique. And I've been in organizations like this where it's like, okay, well, off you go, and if you succeed, great. If you don't succeed, oh well, that was your fault. It's like this rite of passage sometimes, and this isn't good. So my name is Emily. Hello. I have a bit of a habit. My habit isn't collecting logos, although it might look like it from this slide. So on this slide, on the right-hand side, this is a number of things that I've done in my personal life. So my habit is connecting people. I generally think that it's a good idea to bring people together because we can do much more when we get together. So there's a bunch of stuff here on the right. It's things, wherever I go, I seem to start a meetup. They're generally agile meetups. And if I can't do a physical meetup, I start one online, which I did recently. So I like to bring people together to discuss, to support each other. When I wanted to get fitter, I started a support group, a Slack support group. That's the Witness the Fitness, because I wanted a support network around me because I didn't think I could do it on my own. I started a community forum for the area of London that I used to live in, Hackney. So I just think that we're better together. And I took this into my working life as well. And I started to connect people that do the same thing as each other, people that can support each other. So there's a bunch of worky logos on there too. Some of the organizations that I've worked with. So organizations are collections of people. Super important, right? We're people. That's what we are, that's what organizations are. And those organizations are sometimes organized into functions. And I've definitely been in organizations like this. So I used to be a project manager in a software delivery organization, and I sat on a table with other project managers. And it was great, because we used to talk to each other, support each other, moan about our clients together, go to the pub a lot together, all those kind of good things that came from being with each other most days. And this was great for us, but it wasn't really necessarily as good for the teams we were working in, because we were also working in teams, but not sitting with those teams. So we're a bit more like this now, a lot of our organizations. If they're agile, we're in multidisciplinary teams. And you might be doing something that's very similar to someone in another team, but maybe you don't spend as much time with them. And I've definitely gone into organizations where I've thought, well, there's other people that do the same thing as me, but they're busy with their team, and they're going for lunch with their team, and they're hanging out with their team. How do I even get to know them? And then we put programs around those as well. And then we get these. So, does anyone here have silos in their organization? Just a few. Anyone that didn't put their hand up, I'm assuming you work on your own. So, you know you've got silos, and we're all very guilty of this ourselves when you say things like this. I'm sure none of you have ever said, procurement, oh, terrible. Commercial are so slow. That group over there, Facebook, rubbish. If you start talking about groups of people as this homogenous group name, it breaks down that empathy. It stops you treating people as human beings. It starts to do this kind of siloed behavior, and it makes it very difficult for information and things to flow across the organization. And you start to hear things like this. So people saying, how do I progress in my role? How should I be doing this bit of work? You know, I have ideas about how to change things in this organization, but I can't do it on my own. I'm new to this organization. How do we do things here? Or even like Sophie earlier, I'm new to this role and I don't know what I'm doing. So this is where communities of practice come in, which I'm now going to talk to you about. So they're groups of people who share concern or passion for something they do and learn how to do it better as they interact regularly. So people that share a practice. You know, you are all here. I'm assuming most of you are product people, and you share a practice. This is a community of so many people in one room together. So communities of practice a little bit like a team, but they're non-hierarchical, voluntary, and a bit longer term, so a little bit often kind of sit more with organizational structure. And it's a term that's been around since the 90s, but it seems to be really relevant in our agile organizations where we start to move further away from people that do the same thing as us. And they look a little bit like this. So you've got a community of practice cutting across programs and teams. You've got the what you do day to day, the bit up the side, the team you're on, the outcomes you're trying to achieve, the stuff you're trying to do. But across the bottom here, we've got the how you do it. And this is super important. You know, I'm assuming many of you are the only person on your team that does your role. You've got lots of people looking to you to answer questions, sometimes expecting you to have all the answers. And it's very hard if you don't have other people around you to share and talk to, bounce ideas off, to see, you know, am I going in the right direction? All those kind of good things. So a community of practice ends up kind of almost being the center of excellence for the role that it represents. So, quick question. Anyone here in a community of practice? A few. Good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you some reasons why you need communities of practice. So for those of you that are in them already, hopefully this rings true to you. For those of you that are thinking about bringing them in or skeptical, hopefully this will convince you or give you some reasons that you can go to the rest of the organization to convince them as well. So the first one, the most important one for me, I would say, is about support network. So it's really important that we're supported. Feeling supported helps build confidence. It gives us confidence that we're doing the right thing. It gives us confidence in our role. Having that confidence helps us feel motivated and keeps us going. I think this is really important. I was reading a book a while ago called Social by Matthew Liebman, and he said this line in there, absent support is taken as a sign of mass rejection. And it rang true to me because I've definitely been in places where I don't feel like I'm being supported by the organization that I'm in. And actually what it tends to do is make you feel demotivated and makes you actually feel like the organization doesn't even care about you. So you're feeling like you're being rejected. This book also goes on to say that public speaking is one way to feel rejected by an entire room at the same time. Yet I still get up and do these things. So support is super important. And it's likely in your organizations that people are supporting each other already. We often gravitate towards people that do the same thing as us, people that have similar outlooks to us, people who think similarly to us, but not everybody has that. So it's fine for those that do, but it's not fine for those that have just joined the organization. Or if you've got kind of a satellite office over there and those people aren't involved, it's like making sure, how do you bring those people in? So we need some way to do that a little bit more formally, which is what communities of practice will do. The second thing is communities create the opportunities for learning and development. Now, there's three things that I'm going to talk about specifically under learning, and that's social learning, experiential learning, and feedback loops. Three things that communities can really help with. So many organizations treat learning as this kind of, you have a budget, assuming you all have learning training budgets, right? You have a budget, you go off and do a course, or you come to a conference, and it's kind of treated that you're individuals doing that thing. But actually doing some of this stuff in communities can be really valuable. So with social learning, Albert Bandura in the 70s talked about this. We learn from observing each other. We learn as children how other people behave, and we kind of codify that into a guide for action for ourselves. So if you're surrounded by people in your organization doing the same role as you, you tend to start to kind of do similar things to each other. You can make this, you can do things like shadowing, you can do observations, you can do other things that help with this as well. And this is particularly good if someone is new to an organization, because it means that they can see how that organization approaches things, how you approach things. Even if they're an expert in the field they're in, they're never an expert in your organization. And David Kolb talks about experiential learning. So he talks about this idea that until you try something out, it doesn't actually fix in your brain. So you might have a new experience, so come to a conference, or if you've been on any of the training courses this week, and you spend some time reflecting on that, what did you learn? You then conclude and you think, how can I use that in my situation, in my environment? And unless you actually try out what you've learned, that won't stick. So having ways to try that out is super important. And added to that, feedback. So feedback is a really powerful way of learning. So if you try something out and you have feedback as to whether that was right or not, whether that worked or not, you're on the right track. If you never get feedback, it can be difficult to kind of course correct and know if you're going in the right direction or not. So these things, within a community of practice, you can take this with a safe group. You can have this idea of deliberate practice. So we spend most of our working lives kind of, doing the real thing all the time. And there's not a lot of time that we step back and say, all right, I need to practice this thing before I take it out there into the real world. Footballers don't have match day every day. They spend time practicing, and they spend time training. So with a safe group of people, you can practice the things you need to get good at in that safe environment and give feedback to each other. So things like trying out workshops with each other, observing other product folk in sessions, doing things, giving them feedback, all really good ways to help people progress. And with these kind of opportunities, people can really fly. So I was in the situation where I was heading up a community of practice of some really experienced people. What I was able to do is, because the community of practice was strong, was bring people in that had the right kind of values, give them the support networks, give them those kind of learning opportunities, and they were able to really fly and really kind of progress in their careers really quickly. So communities enable knowledge sharing and reduce duplication. So I like to think of knowledge like this iceberg. So any of you that have wikis at work, you'll know that all the information is up to date, correct, and you can find everything. So we tend to treat a lot of the information that we have as this thing called explicit knowledge. And explicit knowledge is the stuff we can write down, the stuff that doesn't change very often. It's kind of processes rather than practice. And actually, a lot of stuff sits here in implicit knowledge. And this is just kind of lives in our brains, in our culture. So we need to make sure that people are talking to each other, or that just kind of disappears. And one thing people also find, this was from a quote from a product manager in a community that I was working with, just the idea of getting people together suddenly, and you'll all have this if you're working with products, so you have dependencies, and if actually you're not linking with other people, you don't see that happening, or you don't see where actually someone over here is building something that's the same as the thing that you're building over here, and you never really talk to each other. So linking that up is super important. So who here left their job within the last job within 5 years? Yeah, most of you. 4? Oh. So, we move around a lot. Forbes in 2012 said people move jobs every 4.4 years. Hopefully none of you left like this. This number is actually probably less in the digital space and less for younger people as well. So every time people leave, they take all that knowledge with them. And if you're not finding ways for people to connect, that kind of goes out the door. Or you end up with that half-an-hour brain dump handover that you get when you join a new organization. So members adopt a common approach, which allows scaling. This is another benefit of communities of practice. So when communities own quality and standards, it kind of decentralizes assurance. So if any of you in any of large organizations, you may end up with these assurance boards or things that need to be ticked. Actually, if people are creating common approaches and they're really owning their practice, they take that out into their teams and it decentralizes that assurance. It means that everyone is, everyone's doing the best that they should do all the time with those consistent approaches. And they are amplifiers. They help you make bigger changes than you can on your own. So it's very hard if you're a single voice in a large organization to change things. If you're a group of people, it's much easier to do. And you can really own that, and you can kind of make change happen as a group, which is one reason why I started some of the communities that I did in my personal life as well. And the fifth reason is that members collaborate on common issues and challenges to create better practices. Now, I use the term better practices rather than best practice, because best practice feels like, well, we've got the best practice now, done it, don't need to think about it anymore. Write it down, put it on the wiki. Really, it's about finding new ways and better ways to do things all the time. And if the community represents the role that we do, we're always looking for new and better ways to do things. And the collaboration bit is really important. So this guy, Alex Pentland, he does a lot of work around understanding how organizations communicate with each other, and says that organizations where people talk to each other more are more successful than organizations where people don't talk to each other. And the collaboration bit of this is the fact that we all have different experiences. And what we're able to do with collaboration is build on top of each other's experiences. So instead of having to experience everything yourself, you're able to build on top of those experiences of other people as well. And there's a story, and I don't know whether it's still true, but UPS drivers, spending all day on the road on their own. One of their policies was that they had to have lunch with other UPS drivers. So they'd have to drive to a location to have lunch with other UPS drivers. And that meant that, over lunch they would talk about different places to put parcels maybe, or different experiences that they had. Over the fence, right on the roof. Different experiences that they had, maybe swap parcels, swap stories, and it meant that their learning was much more accelerated that way. And Francesca Gino, in her book that's not out in the UK yet called Rebel Talent, talks about this idea that creativity happens between expertise and experimentation. And this, when you bring people together that have different levels of experience, those that are kind of new and younger, newer to the role, much more experimental. Those that have been in the role for a long time are kind of more at the expertise end and less flexible. And bringing that together really brings this creativity. So just recapping on those. So communities of practice, creating support networks, learning and development, knowledge sharing, scaling common approaches, and collaborating in better practices. So before I finish, I'm just going to give you some tips on where you should start if you haven't done already. So the first thing is to clarify who the community is for. It's very important if you want to create a safe space in a community to understand where the edges are. If it's just completely open, that can break that safe space. So it's useful to understand who it's for. So if you're going to create a community for product managers, it might be people with product manager in the title. It might be more nuanced than that. So then you need to get those people together regularly. So you build trust through regularly meeting, regularly doing things together. And actually, you can't get any of this good stuff if you don't build the trust first. So if you're a new community and you're on the same site, meet once a week, even if that's going for lunch once a week. And then start by sharing stories. What you'll find is if you start talking about the work that you're doing and stories about the work that you're doing and you've done, other people will be like, oh, I'm doing that, or that's similar, and you'll start making connections, and you'll start seeing places where you can improve things or places you can work together. Then create opportunities for learning, building trust, adding value, and supporting people. So find ways to learn new things together. Maybe there's a new technique you want to try out, or there's been an amazing product conference on with some great videos that you want to share with the rest of the community. And different ways to support each other and build trust. If you don't vary that up a bit, you'll end up either just doing status meetings or having moan fests. Both can be useful, but not all the time. And then see what works and turn up the good. So see how it works for you and your community, and keep doing the things that work well and stop doing the things that don't. And communities take time to mature, so they go through a number of stages as they mature, and all of this takes time, and they jump around as well. So it's like teams. You'll find there's points in time where things are going really well and people are really excited, particularly when you first start getting people together in this forming stage. People get super excited because they're like, oh, there's people doing the same thing as me, and I can learn all these new exciting things. And then all the pressure of the job comes back in, and they don't have any time to do the community stuff anymore. So there are times where if you're somebody that's kind of trying to drive a community happening, then you might need to kind of go, well, that's okay, and put a bit of extra effort in and really encourage people to get together. So communities of practice eventually will go from your original silos to sharing knowledge, onto solving shared problems, into using the collective power of the community to create better practices and magic. I'm going to show, I've got a demonstration of this in the best Venn diagram ever. So here are some silos. Here's sharing knowledge. And here's the magic. This is an illustration I stole from Tenso Graphics. I think it's a threadless t-shirt as well. So there's much more to talk about, and I could talk for hours on this. There is a book. It is here as well, and I'm around today if you want to chat more and you want to share any of your community building experiences with me as well. Thank you.